Hello friends, and welcome to Escaping the Mouse with your host, me, Ruck Roll. Alright, we're going to try something a little different today. This is going to be a cooking episode. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make some of my cream of mushroom and wild rice chicken soup. It's really simple to do, but it's really time consuming because we're going to be working with wild rice. And any of you who have ever cooked wild rice, you know it isn't minute rice, it's about 36-hour rice. So we got to spend the next 24 hours just preparing the rice. So let's start with that. Alright, so the ingredients for this are fairly simple. You want to start with 2 cups of long grain black wild rice. I get this from Minnesota because all my family is in Minnesota and that's just the place to go. You'll need 4 cans of Campbell's condensed cream of mushroom soup. About 4 cups of mushrooms. Oftentimes I will use canned mushrooms, but I couldn't find those in the store, so I figured we'll just use regular sliced mushrooms, and that's about 4 cups worth. And then 6 chicken breasts, and you can kind of fiddle around with that. If you want a little bit more chicken in yours, that's cool. You can also augment it with vegetables. Carrots are really good, peas are really good. Use your imagination. And then it's just salt and pepper to taste. So the first part of this is preparing the wild rice. And like I said, this takes a long time to do because the wild rice takes forever to get ready. So that's why I'm starting this today before yesterday's video is even started, because we're going to have to let this thing soak overnight in order to get where we need to be. So I'm going to start just with the wild rice now. And what we're going to do is we're going to put 4 or 5 quarts of water in a 12-quart saucepan. Alright, so I've filled my 12-quart pan with about half full of water. And all I'm going to do right now is I'm going to mix in the rice. And we're going to put it on a medium heat and bring it to a simmer. This is, like I said, this is going to take a while. What you're going to do is you're going to boil it. You're going to let it simmer for a long time. You're going to let it cool down. You're going to drain the water. You're going to fill it up with the water again. You're going to bring it up to a boil. You're going to let it simmer. And you're going to repeat this process over and over and over again for the next 24 hours. This will make the rice plump up and be ready to go. So let's do that. Now that the rice is boiling, what I want to do is lower the heat and just bring it down to a simmer. And at this point I'm going to cover it too. From this point on, I'm just going to kind of check the pot periodically, every half hour or an hour or so, and stir it, and just make sure everything's looking good. Alright, it's about 11:30 at night, and this has been simmering for about 3 hours, so we're going to do our first water replacement. Basically what we need to do is just replace all the water. So what I'm going to do is pour this all into a colander, just a typical pasta colander in the sink, and we're going to drain all the water out of it. It's hard to believe that just 3 hours ago that was 2 cups of rice, huh? So once again we're going to fill up our 12-quart pot about halfway full with water. And the wild rice goes back into the pot. And back on the burner and brought up to a boil again. And now I've managed to get the whole concoction up to boiling a point again. So since it's like midnight, and I probably should have started this a little bit earlier in the day if I was really being realistic. So keep that in mind. But at this point, now I've got it up to boiling temperature. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn the heat off and put a cover on it, and that'll be good for the night. It'll just kind of, it'll take it another 3 or 4 hours to get back down to room temperature, and during that time the rice is just going to continue to soften, and that's what we want. So here we go. See you in the morning. All right, so it's the next morning. This has been kind of just simmering in hot water, and actually, the pot is still warm to the touch. So the rice has continued to soak in the water, and now we're going to turn the heat back on and bring it back up to a slow simmer. Now, the normal rule of thumb when I'm cooking wild rice is usually 24 to 36 hours of boiling time, simmering time in the pot. But sometimes that's a little bit overkill. And if I wait till 24 hours or if I wait till 36 hours, we're never going to get this vlog covered, finished today. So we are at about 20 hours right now. It's been 14 hours since we did the water replacement last night. At this point, I'm going to drain the rice the final time, and we're going to start doing the rest of the setup. And then usually what I'll do is I'll just rinse it a few times too, just with cold water from the tap. So the next thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually start preparing the soup, and I'm going to actually cook that in the same pot that we cooked up the rice. Now at the same time I prepare the soup and get that ready to go, I also got to get the chicken ready. Now there's a couple ways that you can deal with the chicken. I've tried them all and they all kind of work the same way. Sometimes I just cut the raw chicken into little chunks and then just throw it right into the soup and it cooks in the soup. Other times I've cut the chicken into little chunks, put it into into a saucepan with or into a large fry pan with a couple of tablespoons of olive oil and just kind of cook it that way. Today what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just bake the chicken breasts. We're just going to put them in the oven for about 20 minutes at about 400 degrees. That should kind of get the chicken all prepared. Then we'll be able to cut up the cooked chicken and insert it into the mix. So let's do that. So as I said earlier in the video, I usually start with about 6 full-size chicken breasts. Now what I found at the store the other day was actually chicken breasts that have been sliced into little chunks. So it may not look like 6, it's going to look like more, but they're going to look like really small ones. So kind of use your imagination on this. I'm using about just a little less than 2 pounds of chicken. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just spread them out onto a cooking sheet so they can be baked. So I'm just going to grab each little strip here and just set it right down here on the pan. And into the oven we go. Now because these are a little smaller strips than normal, I'm actually going to reduce the baking time a little bit just because it's not going to take as long to cook them. So I originally said about 20 minutes, and that's good if you have a full-size chicken breast. I'm going to drop it down to about 15 minutes because even if that's not enough, once we pop it in the soup and cook it in there a little bit, it'll finish up all the cooking. Alright, so what I have now is 4 cans of Campbell's cream of mushroom condensed soup. So I'm going to empty all 4 of those cans into the pot, and we're going to start with that. Now normally when you're making condensed soup by Campbell's, you're going to put 1 can of water in for each can of soup you're going to do. We're actually going to put about 1.5 cans of water in because the rice is still going to continue to absorb some of the water, and we're going to cook it for a little while, and we're going to get a little evaporation. So once you factor in those two things, the water, the concentration of the soup will kind of get back to where you want it to be. So I'm going to put, we put 4 cans of soup. I'm going to put 6 cans of water in this. So at this point, I'm just going to kind of mix it up a little bit here just to kind of get everything stirred in, kind of wash all the concentrate off the sides. And I'm going to begin cooking that. We're going to put the heat on low right now. And I'm going to reinsert the rice at this point. Like I said, the rice will absorb some of the moisture in here, and we'll also get some a little bit of evaporation. Just kind of mixing it up right now, turn it into something good here. Getting it all really stirred in. And now we're going to bring it up to a slow boil. That'll take a little while, so we'll catch up to you in a few minutes. Alright, so it's 15 minutes later and the chicken breasts have come out of the oven. I'm not ready to process them yet for 2 reasons. 1, the soup isn't ready, and 2, this stuff's a little hot to handle. And since I don't want to just kind of leave it out on the counter here because the insect issue in Texas, it's impossible to keep bugs out of your house, and I don't want bugs crawling all over this. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put it onto a plate, and I'm going to put it in the fridge for safekeeping for now. Now I'm going to use a fork once again to get the meat onto the plate here. This is a different fork than I used to put the chicken strips onto the plate because that was dealing with raw chicken, and this is cooked chicken. You don't want to get the two mixed up. Chicken is really susceptible to bacteria like botulism. And if you use the same fork that you use to handle the raw chicken to handle the cooked meat, you could reinfect it with botulism. So, I'm gonna play it safe because that's how it's done. And they're probably still a little bit undercooked a bit, but that's okay. Once we throw them into the soup and boil them in there, that'll finish that off. And into the refrigerator they go. Alright, so we've managed to get the concoction up to a slow simmer. So at this point I'm just going to add salt and pepper to taste. Personally, I like a lot of salt and a lot of pepper in this, but use what seems right to you, and just try, put a little in, see if you like it, and you can always add more. You can't always take it out, so don't overdo it. I usually start with the salt first because you don't want the pepper flavor overpowering the salt. You kind of want to get the salty flavor established right first, and then you move on to the pepper. Just as an extra thing here, if you want a little bit more bite, you can use cayenne pepper rather than regular black pepper, but I'm just going to use regular black pepper this time. Be careful when inserting the pepper because sometimes when you do your initial taste test, it doesn't really give you an accurate indication of how much bite it's going to have, because sometimes you got to cook it a little bit to get the flavor out of the pepper and into the soup. So go easy on that if you're too sensitive to really, really spicy things. But now what we're going to do is we're just going to let this simmer for a little while, and we're going to go prepare the chicken strips. Alright, so these have been in the refrigerator, so they're kind of to the point where you can handle them now. So just cut up into little chunks. And it's okay, it's going to seem a little dry right now because it's been in the refrigerator a bit, but once it gets back into the soup, it'll moisten up again real nice. And into the soup it goes. All right, so now I got all the chicken in there. From this point on, you got to make sure you keep the temperature on the stove really, really low, so you stay at just a little simmering point where you're not really cooking too hard. I actually prefer cooking on gas because you can control the heat a little bit more accurately. But unfortunately, I got an electric range here, so I got to be especially careful with that. And the problem is that the meat tends to settle to the bottom, and that's where everything is hottest because that's right making contact with the heating element on the stove. So you got to keep the simmer very low and stir it periodically just to keep everything mixed up and keep the solids from going to the bottom. At this point, I'm also going to insert the mushrooms and let them cook in for a while. Now, as I said at the beginning of the video, I tend to prefer kind of canned mushrooms. They got like 4-ounce canned mushrooms, and you get four or six cans of those in there. They're already kind of pre-softened, which helps a lot. But I couldn't find those in the store yesterday, so I just got some sliced mushrooms from the produce section. And I don't think I'm going to need all of these, so I think I'm going to throw about half of those in there. Maybe a little bit more than half. And then just kind of stir it in, let it all kind of soak in. Now I cover it and just let it simmer for a while. So about an hour ago, I just turned off the heat after it had been simmering for a while and just kind of let it soak for a while. And it's been going for about an hour now. So I think what we're ready to do now is let's put it in the containers for storage. So there we go. We got 4 containers of soup ready to go in the freezer or in the fridge, ready to eat. My experience is that this will give me good 10 or 12 very delicious, very filling, very satisfying meals. Obviously, it all depends on whether you like, cream of mushroom soup and mushrooms and all that, but it's one of my favorites. And while it takes a while to do, it isn't really that hard to do. And I probably spent all of $20 on materials for this, and now I got 10 or 15 meals out of it. Alright, so this is interesting. I was digging through the analytics section on the YouTube channel, and on this section here it lists all the videos and whether they're eligible for monetization. And every single one of them is available for monetization except this one. Can you guess which video this is that YouTube says isn't suitable for most advertisers? Yeah, apparently they don't like Memorial Day or honoring our vets. I'm sorry, that's disgusting, YouTube. Major fail. So I just got some family news that's a little upsetting to me. My mother had a knee replacement surgery done a couple years ago, and there have been a lot of complications with that, and the recovery process has been very, very slow. So she's in a wheelchair for the most part, and requires my father to kind of help get her from place to place and bring her to her doctor's appointments and bring her to her hair appointments and deal with all that stuff. Well, apparently, I don't know exactly what happened, but it sounds like my father threw out his back and is in real serious pain, and so he's almost kind of bedridden right now. And I just got a text message from my mother. It looks like I'm going to be making an emergency trip back to California just to help out for a couple days until we can get things worked out. So vlogs may be a little erratic over the next couple days, and so we'll see what happens. But just keep my parents in your thoughts and prayers. I think that's all I really have for tonight. So thanks as always for watching, and I will see you next time on Escaping the Mouse. Good night.